In this course, we've talked about a lot of practices that help strengthen our minds, our bodies, our brains, and reduce our stress, like breathing, reading, journaling, meditation. Now, if we only do these practices every once in a while, or if we don't perform these practices on a consistent basis, we're really not going to see any change. We're not going to drive home neuroplasticity or brain change. We're not really going to develop greater mindsets. So we need to take these practices and these mindset techniques and turn them into habits. We need to understand how to break bad habits, how to form new, healthier habits. We need to understand the different components of habits because they can be broken down into a couple different parts. And there's 3 parts in particular that make up what's called the habit loop. And the 3 parts are the cue or the trigger, the behavior, and the reward. So for example, let's take a look at my personal stress and what I've done to deal with my personal stress in the past, which was unhealthy to binge on cookies. And that became a bad habit for me that I eventually broke because I learned about habits and I learned about how to break bad habits and form healthier ones. So for me, the cue was the stress. The stress triggered my brain to do something to make me feel good, to alleviate the stress. And so what I did was I went to the pantry and I reached for junk food. I binged on cookies, and that became a bad habit of mine because of the reward, because they tasted great. I felt great after I ate them. I got that dopamine release that kept me back for more and craving more. And that goes back to why it's important to understand how our brains work, to understand the dopamine pathway, because we can develop bad habits, especially with respect to something that's stressing us out or something that we're afraid of, because the brain wants to avoid those things. The brain wants to do things to make us feel good, to alleviate that stress, to alleviate that fear. And it wasn't until I really understood this habit formula to where I could break the bad habit. So what did I do? How did I break the bad habit of binging on cookies and sweets when I was stressed out? I changed the behavior. I started eating sweet fruit instead of the cookies and the junk food. So at least I still got that little sweet treat, but it was way healthier than the junk food. And the research suggests that you can actually keep the reward the same. You could also, instead of changing behavior, try to eliminate the cue, but especially if it's something stressful, that may be hard to do. So as you're working on eliminating the cue, you can change the behavior. What you can do is, instead of the junk food, you can go and reach for fruit. Or you can try to eliminate the junk food so it's easier to eat healthier. But again, I kept the reward the same. I still got that little bit of dopamine hit because of the fruit. I still got that sweet treat to help alleviate some of that stress. But over time, as I worked to eliminate the cue, I didn't have to worry about sweet treats anymore. I didn't have to worry about eating the junk food or even eating the fruit because I got rid of the cue. I got rid of the trigger that was causing the bad habit. So again, it's really important to understand how habits work, how to form new habits, how to break bad habits. And the last component to this, in terms of forming healthy habits and new habits, is to start small and to start immediately after an existing habit. Because of the way the brain's wired, especially when we're starting something new or we're trying to overcome bad habits, things that have been wired into us, it can be challenging. It can require a lot of energy. The brain doesn't necessarily like to change all that much, especially if it's used to something that it likes, like a bad habit that brings us dopamine and alleviates stress. So that's why it's important to start small and start immediately after something that we automatically always do, like brushing our teeth or getting a shower. So if you want to start a new habit of reading or journaling at home, do it right after you brush your teeth or do it right after you get out of the shower. It'll be easier to develop that habit based upon research. Again, it's so important to understand things like habits and how our brains work and how these different psychological and mindset practices improves our health and well-being because, again, everything in our lives begins and ends in the brain and with our thinking. Our thoughts have a huge impact on our habits, on our daily life. So many of the situations in life that we face aren't necessarily bad, but we interpret them as bad, or we interpret them as being potentially dangerous or scary, which can lead to bad habits, to alleviate and deal with that fear, that stress, that anxiety. And this is known as the Thomas theorem in psychology. It's the notion that, again, the situations that we face in life aren't necessarily bad, but we make them out to be bad or worse than they are in our own minds. So remember, it's important to work on our brains, to work on our minds, to understand how our brains work, to understand how habits form, how to break bad habits and form new healthy ones.